Imagine your fiancé tells you your last name is too weak to pass on to your future children, and suddenly, everything you thought was solid starts to crumble. Would you confront her or quietly accept it to keep the peace? That's exactly what happened to David, a 31-year-old man, after 6 years of love and 2 years engaged, when his partner dropped a bomb at dinner with her parents. But what started as a simple insult about a name escalated into secrets, betrayal, and a shocking twist that neither of them saw coming. How far would you go to protect your family legacy? David, 31, and Piper, 29, had been together for 6 years, engaged for 2, and shared a dream most couples crave: starting a family. They had spent months researching fertility clinics, budgeting, and imagining the nursery they would fill with laughter. On paper, they were a perfect pair, committed and in love. But last Monday, during a seemingly innocent dinner with Piper's parents, everything shifted in an instant. Piper announced casually that any future children would carry only her last name. Not just that, she called David's name weak. Fleming. It sounds like phlegm. Our kids would get bullied, she said, her parents nodding in agreement. David froze, fork halfway to his mouth, stunned. 6 years together, and now he was being told his very identity was inadequate, that his family's legacy meant nothing. Confused, hurt, and angry, he needed air, so he left the table, unaware that this was only the beginning. The conversation that should have been about names and traditions quickly spiraled into manipulation, money, and hidden truths. By the time David returned home, Piper was already smiling about a solution her father had offered: a fully funded IVF if she could secure the right name for their children. But what David didn't know yet was that beneath her confident exterior lay secrets that would shatter trust, test loyalty, and completely upend their future together. And it all started with a simple name. David had always believed in fairness and respect in a relationship, but nothing could have prepared him for what unfolded that evening. Sitting in the cozy dining room of Piper's parents' estate, he tried to follow the conversation, but every word felt like a blow. Kenneth, her father, was passionately discussing family legacies, his voice rich with pride. Piper, with a casual smirk, interrupted him. "Actually, I've decided. Our kids will have my last name only." David laughed nervously, hoping it was a joke. Piper's tone, however, left no room for humor. "Your last name is Weak. Fleming. It sounds like phlegm. Our kids would get bullied." Her mother nodded in agreement, echoing the same sentiment. David felt his stomach drop. 6 years together, and in one sentence, his family, his history, everything he valued was dismissed as inferior. He tried to reason, mentioning his grandfather's contributions to the city, the bridge named after him. But Eleanor waved it off. Kenneth leaned in, almost mocking. "Your name? What has any Fleming ever accomplished?" David felt trapped, the walls of the room closing in. It wasn't just Piper. Her parents were complicit in undermining him. The conversation, which should have been about names or family heritage, had become an attack on his identity, his lineage. After leaving the table, David sat in his car for 20 minutes thinking. Piper returned home, glowing, speaking about how her father would fund IVF if only the right name was chosen. She assumed he would agree. She thought time would soften the blow, but David had other plans. That night, while Piper slept, he made a decision. He would cancel the fertility appointment. The $3,500 non-refundable deposit would be lost, but he needed to reclaim his dignity. Tuesday morning, David called the clinic. "We've decided not to proceed," he said, giving a vague personal reason. The clinic staff asked politely about the refund, and he told them Piper handled the finances. A half-truth. The moment was brief, almost clinical, but it felt like his first act of control after days of feeling powerless. Over the next 24 hours, he started moving personal items to his friend Craig's apartment. Nothing overt, just enough to assert independence and prepare for what was coming. Piper, oblivious, continued to talk excitedly about ovulation schedules and finally starting our journey. She had no idea the plan had shifted entirely. On Thursday night, David confronted her lightly about the name debate, masking his true intentions. Piper laughed, dismissing the idea of genetics, making him realize how deep the disconnect had grown. By Friday morning, as Piper prepared for the clinic, David calmly reminded her, "We're just talking to a doctor, right? First impressions matter." She left, expecting him to follow, unaware that he had already set the dominoes in motion. By mid-morning, David's phone exploded with frantic calls and texts. The clinic had processed the cancellation. David responded with a simple, cutting text. "Someone with weak Fleming energy probably shouldn't be making babies anyway. Good luck with the Hawthorne legacy." Then he turned off his phone, leaving Piper in a storm of confusion and rage. The escalation was immediate. Within hours, Piper's emotions cycled through confusion, anger, bargaining, and desperation. Her parents became involved, threatening legal action. Kenneth was furious about the public humiliation he and his daughter had suffered, framing it as a financial and social insult. David, however, stayed calm. He had recognized the manipulation and wasn't about to be drawn into it. Saturday morning, Piper appeared at Craig's apartment, demanding a discussion. David, detached, clarified his reasons: her disrespect for his family and her attempts to control the narrative. Piper's arguments faltered, revealing the underlying fear and insecurity. She had assumed he would accept everything for the promise of a baby, for the prestige of her family's name. As the conversation unfolded, David realized the broader pattern. Piper's family had been positioning themselves for financial gain. insane, relying on his income to maintain the lifestyle they projected. The name dispute was never just about identity. It was leverage, a tool to secure what they believed was owed. David remained resolute, understanding that this wasn't just a battle over names, it was a confrontation with entitlement, deceit, and manipulation. Even as Piper pleaded and attempted compromise, offering to hyphenate, David refused. The more she tried to negotiate, the clearer it became. The problem wasn't her heart, it was the entire system of control her family had built. David was no longer willing to participate. By standing firm, he reclaimed agency, asserting that respect and integrity mattered more than wealth, appearances, or social standing. As part 1 closes, the stage is set for a deeper unraveling. Secrets, financial manipulation, and hidden truths are about to come to light, and David's decision to step back has initiated a chain reaction that neither he nor Piper can fully predict. The story isn't just about a name anymore, it's about trust, legacy, and the shocking consequences of entitlement. Would Piper's family's schemes survive the truth? And how far would David go to protect his own legacy? By Sunday, the tension had reached a boiling point. David's phone, once silenced, was alive with missed calls and frantic texts. Piper's messages went from pleading to accusatory in mere minutes. Each ping felt like a small explosion in his chest, but he ignored them, knowing that responding in anger would only fuel the fire. Meanwhile, the unraveling of Piper's family's carefully constructed facade was quietly beginning. Monday morning brought unexpected validation. A call from his mother revealed the full extent of what had been said at that dinner. Eleanor's dismissive comments about his family's legacy were not just cruel, they were part of a narrative designed to diminish the Fleming name publicly. David's family history, including his grandfather Donald Fleming's contributions to the city, was being twisted, minimized, and weaponized. For the first time, David felt a sense of clarity amidst the chaos. The insult wasn't personal, it was strategic. Word of the confrontation spread quickly through family and social circles. Piper's brother, Branson, even reached out with a mix of incredulity and reluctant respect. "Your sister dumped our future kid's connection to my family," he said. "You just returned the favor." Fair. David realized that even Piper's own family members recognized the entitlement and manipulation at play. By midweek, Piper attempted a new strategy. She showed up at David's workplace, armed with tears and a gift basket, trying to appeal to his emotions. "Baby, I'm sorry," she pleaded. "I didn't mean it. We can hyphenate now, Hawthorne Fleming, or Fleming Hawthorne. Whatever you want." David, calm and resolute, refused. Security had to escort her out, and coworkers watched the entire scene unfold, entertained by the drama yet sensing the gravity of the betrayal beneath it. Meanwhile, Eleanor tried her hand at persuasion over the phone. "David, sweetheart, let's be adults about this." Piper made a mistake. She's willing to compromise, but compromise wasn't enough. It wasn't about the name. It was about the audacity of insulting an entire lineage, the attempt to erase a family's identity for social gain. David saw through the manipulation and hung up, reinforcing his boundaries. Then came the revelation that changed everything. David's cousin Teresa, a lab worker, texted him about Piper's past fertility tests. Piper had known her results for 6 months, keeping him in the dark and allowing him to worry unnecessarily about his own fertility. This wasn't just secrecy, it was control. She had timed the IVF push to align with her narrative, making David complicit in a plan that could have shifted blame onto him. David's mind raced as the pieces fell into place. Piper's actions were a calculated effort to manipulate him emotionally and financially. That Saturday, when David returned to the apartment to collect more of his belongings, he was confronted by Piper, her mother, and her aunt. They tried to argue that he was throwing away opportunity and wealth, painting themselves as victims. David, however, remained steadfast. He calmly pointed out the pattern of deceit and manipulation, the entitlement displayed, and the blatant disrespect for his family's legacy. Piper's tearful explanations revealed fear and desperation. She had panicked over fertility issues and financial instability, but David was unmoved. The reality was that the trust had been broken far beyond repair. The weeks that followed revealed even more. Kenneth's business had been failing for years, and the lavish lifestyle they projected was funded largely by borrowed money and the expectation of David's financial support. The IVF funding, conditional on David's participation and agreement to social leverage. Piper's strategy was no longer just about names. It was about financial control, inheritance, and the illusion of social prestige. The public fallout was almost poetic. Piper's attempts to secure a future with someone strong enough to uphold the Hawthorne legacy backfired. Her actions were exposed in the community, and the family's financial instability became common knowledge. Meanwhile, David, by stepping back, preserved both his integrity and his family's reputation. He even found personal happiness, slowly forming a connection with Bridget, a veterinarian who valued his character over titles or money. Their bond, rooted in genuine respect and shared values, stood in stark contrast to the manipulative dynamics he had just escaped. Throughout this chaos, David maintained emotional control. He allowed Piper's schemes to collapse under their own weight, understanding that entitlement and deception are often self-destructive. Each failed attempt by Piper and her family reinforced the lesson. Respect, honesty, and integrity cannot be replaced by social standing, wealth, or or perceived power. The contrast between the Hawthorne illusion and the tangible legacy of the Flemings could not have been clearer. As Part 2 closes, the tension reaches its peak. Piper's desperation, her family's financial collapse, and David's unwavering stance create a perfect storm. Secrets have been unveiled, reputations challenged, and a new dynamic established. The next chapter will reveal the final consequences, the ultimate twist, and the poetic justice that emerges when entitlement and deceit collide with integrity and patience. The question now isn't just who will prevail, it's how far the ripple effects of these decisions will reach, and whether David's careful patience will finally bring closure to this 6-year saga. By the time Part 3 begins, the fallout from Piper's schemes had reached full force. The once glamorous Hawthorne image was crumbling, revealing a house of cards built on entitlement and lies. Kenneth's business had officially failed, the estate sold, and Eleanor was no longer teaching exclusive country club yoga classes. Now she taught at the local Y. The Hawthornes' perceived power and influence evaporated almost overnight. Meanwhile, David had reclaimed his life, his name, and more importantly, his dignity. Piper, desperate and humiliated, attempted one final maneuver. She sent David an email, apologizing for the name insults and revealing her family's financial collapse. She admitted she had pushed the IVF agenda not out of love but out of desperation, hoping to secure his support and stabilize her family's crumbling legacy. David read it silently, a mixture of disbelief and vindication washing over him. Her confession validated everything he had suspected. The insults, the pressure, the manipulation, it was all calculated. But the universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. Remember Piper's comment about the Fleming name being weak? Well, the man she had been pursuing as a fallback, Preston Sterling, turned out to have a wife whose maiden name was Fleming, one M, but strong enough to dismantle his supposed social advantage. Preston had been blindsided by Piper's schemes and abandoned her the moment he realized the truth. The same name she had scorned held more power than she could ever imagine. David couldn't help but smile at the poetic justice. In the weeks that followed, David's life began to rebuild in ways he never anticipated. He started spending more time with Bridget, a veterinarian who appreciated him for who he was, not his surname, wealth, or connections. Her parents welcomed him warmly, respecting his values and integrity. For the first time, David experienced the contrast between a relationship rooted in genuine affection and one entangled in manipulation and pretense. Meanwhile, Piper's attempts to regain social standing failed spectacularly. Her reputation at the country club was in ruins. Gossip about the failed Hawthorne legacy spread like wildfire, and her attempts at financial leverage were blocked at every turn. Even her brief career in dental reception offered little solace. Without the illusion of wealth or connections, she had no leverage to manipulate others. Her family's downfall became a cautionary tale, and she was forced to confront the consequences of her actions in real time. The final, satisfying twist came when David realized the full extent of what had transpired. His weak-sounding surname, once the target of ridicule, had become a symbol of resilience and legacy. His grandfather's bridge, his family's real-world contributions, and now his own personal integrity had outlasted the illusions of wealth and power Piper and her parents clung to. For David, this wasn't just a victory over manipulation. It was proof that character and legacy cannot be fabricated or bought. As the dust settled, David prepared for a new chapter. His relationship with Bridget was blossoming slowly but with solid foundations. They planned a small ceremony on the Fleming Bridge, honoring the history and achievements of his family. It was a stark contrast to the grandiose wedding Piper had envisioned, one based on appearances and entitlement. This intimate celebration symbolized not just love, but the triumph of authenticity over pretense. Reflecting on the entire ordeal, David understood the lessons clearly. Boundaries matter. Manipulation, no matter how clever, eventually collapses under its own weight. Family legacy isn't about titles, money, or influence. It's about integrity, history, and respect. While Piper and her family chased illusions, David had embraced reality, preserving both his family name and his future. As the story closes, the question lingers: how often do we let entitlement and appearances cloud our judgment in relationships? David's journey serves as a reminder that protecting oneself and standing up for what is right may lead to temporary chaos, but ultimately creates lasting peace. The weak name, once ridiculed, became the cornerstone of his next chapter, proving that true strength comes from honesty, resilience, and staying true to one's roots. The legacy of the Flemings remains intact, stronger than ever, while the Hawthorne's illusions have crumbled entirely. And David? He's finally free, surrounded by people who value him for who he is, not the name he carries. What would you do if someone you loved tried to erase your family legacy just to boost their own status? David's story reminds us that relationships are tested not just by love, but by respect, trust, and integrity. Standing up for yourself can feel isolating, even terrifying, but sometimes stepping back is the only way to let truth and justice take their course. Think about your own life. Are there people who demand loyalty at the expense of your values? How far would you go to protect your name, your family, and your peace of mind? I read every single one of your comments, and I want to hear your take on this story. Did David do the right thing? Would you have acted the same way in his shoes or tried to compromise despite the manipulation? opinion, share your experiences, because your story could help someone else realize the importance of setting boundaries and valuing themselves. If you're drawn to real-life stories filled with drama, shock, and emotional twists that teach lessons about trust, family, and integrity, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. You just watched Family True Tales, where every day, real stories change lives. And remember, the universe has a way of delivering poetic justice when people try to manipulate and deceive. The next story we share may challenge everything you thought you knew about loyalty and betrayal. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss the twist that will leave you speechless.